In the heart of Indiana's countryside, beneath the seemingly serene grounds of Fox Hollow Farm, lay secrets so horrifying they would shock the nation. What appeared to be just another idyllic estate became the site of one of the most chilling discoveries in criminal history. For years, Herb Baumeister lived on this property, blending into his wealthy suburban lifestyle while hiding a dark obsession. The laughter of family gatherings and the hum of business meetings masked the unimaginable horrors buried just beneath the surface. It wasn't until police began searching Fox Hollow Farm that the horrifying truth was revealed. The remains of dozens of men, their lives brutally taken, and their bodies scattered like discarded relics of Baumeister's murderous spree. Thousands of bone fragments, concealed by time and soil, began to emerge under the relentless scrutiny of investigators. Each fragment told a story. Each discovery brought the case closer to unraveling a horrifying reality. How did Herb Baumeister maintain such a horrifying double life? And how many more secrets remain hidden beneath the surface of Fox Hollow Farm? Welcome to True Crimex, where we uncover the chilling truths behind the darkest corners of human behavior. In today's episode, we delve into the horrifying case of Herb Baumeister and the sinister secrets of Fox Hollow Farm. Make sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to stay updated on more shocking stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Indianapolis was a city of contrasts, a growing metropolis where vibrant nightlife mingled with unspoken dangers. Within its LGBTQ+ community, whispers of unease began to circulate. Men were vanishing, often after nights out at popular bars. Some were last seen leaving with strangers, others simply disappeared without a trace. Families reported their loved ones missing, but in many cases, little progress was made. Law enforcement, stretched thin and often indifferent to the struggles of marginalized communities, treated these disappearances as isolated incidents. He said he'd call me after going out with friends. That was the last I ever heard from him. Weeks passed and no one could tell me anything. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. As the number of missing person cases grew, a troubling pattern emerged. Many of the men were young, fit, and had similar physical features. Police began to suspect a predator was targeting the LGBTQ+ community. But without hard evidence or witnesses willing to come forward, the investigation stalled. Meanwhile, fear gripped the community. Bars once filled with laughter became places of hushed conversations, and people began warning each other to be careful about whom they trusted. Unbeknownst to anyone, the man responsible for these disappearances was living just outside the city. Herb Baumeister, a seemingly successful businessman and family man, was hiding a sinister secret. His sprawling property, Fox Hollow Farm, would later become synonymous with horror. For years, he led a double life, evading suspicion and luring unsuspecting victims to their deaths. As the disappearances continued, families grew more desperate, and investigators faced mounting pressure. Yet no one could have predicted that the key to solving the mystery lay beneath the soil of one man's private sanctuary. Could the city's missing men have all fallen victim to one man's twisted impulses? Or was there a network of evil operating in the shadows, leaving heartbreak in its wake? Herb Baumeister was the picture of suburban success. He co-owned a thriving thrift store chain, Save-A-Lot, with his wife Julie, and lived in a sprawling estate on Fox Hollow Farm. To outsiders, he was a hard-working entrepreneur and a devoted family man. But those closest to him noticed something unsettling beneath the surface. His behavior, often described as eccentric, occasionally veered into the bizarre. Friends recalled moments where Baumeister's mask of normalcy slipped. His strange fascination with death unnerved those around him, and his temper flared unpredictably. Behind the facade of his professional success and family life, Baumeister was leading a dark double life. Unknown to his family, he frequently visited gay bars in downtown Indianapolis. There, he charmed and lured men with promises of companionship, never revealing the horrors awaiting them at Fox Hollow Farm. Baumeister's charm made him an effective predator. He used his seemingly mild demeanor to gain trust, convincing men to follow him to his secluded property. What started as a casual invitation to his estate often ended in violence. His victims, stripped of their autonomy and discarded like debris, were left buried or scattered across the farm. For years, Baumeister operated without raising suspicion. His family knew nothing of his visits to the city's bars or the men he brought home. But as the missing person cases mounted, the predator's luck began to run out. Detectives, piecing together witness accounts and patterns, grew closer to identifying the man behind the disappearances. What drove a man like Baumeister to such extremes? Was it a need for control, a sadistic thrill, or something deeper lurking within his psyche? And more importantly, how many lives had he claimed before anyone realized what was happening? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Fox Hollow Farm seemed like the embodiment of suburban success, a sprawling property that boasted wealth and security. It was the kind of estate that inspired admiration, even envy. Herb Baumeister, a successful businessman, was the proud owner of the farm, living there with his wife, Julie, and their children. To anyone looking from the outside, the family appeared to be the picture of stability. But what lay beneath this veneer of normalcy was nothing short of terrifying. Behind the grand facade of Fox Hollow Farm, Herb Baumeister was leading a chilling double life. While his family believed he was a hard-working entrepreneur and loving father, he had transformed parts of the property into a secret killing ground. Under the cover of darkness, Baumeister lured his victims, primarily young men from Indianapolis's LGBTQ+ community, back to his secluded estate. Promising a night of fun and companionship, he instead subjected them to unspeakable acts of violence. The men who trusted him enough to step onto the farm's grounds were often never seen again. Baumeister had carefully chosen his hunting ground, the gay bars of Indianapolis, where marginalized individuals were less likely to be missed by a society already ignoring their struggles. Once he brought his victims back to Fox Hollow Farm, they were isolated from the outside world, far from help or escape. The property itself became an accomplice to his crimes. Its expansive woods provided a natural barrier, muffling the sounds of struggle and ensuring privacy. Baumeister knew the land intimately, using its secluded areas to bury his victims or scatter their remains. Over time, Fox Hollow Farm transformed from a peaceful retreat into a graveyard of despair, its soil holding the secrets of countless lives taken too soon. For years, Baumeister's family remained oblivious to his crimes. Julie, his wife, rarely ventured into certain parts of the property and dismissed her husband's erratic behavior as eccentricity. Even as missing person cases began to stack up in nearby Indianapolis, no one suspected that the answers lay buried in the soil of Fox Hollow Farm. How could someone maintain such a horrifying double life, hiding monstrous deeds behind the walls of an idyllic home? And how long would Baumeister's secrets have remained hidden, if not for the survivor who finally escaped? The investigation into Herb Baumeister gained momentum when a survivor bravely came forward, providing chilling details of what had happened to him at Fox Hollow Farm. His account described a night of escalating terror that ended with a narrow escape from Baumeister's clutches. The survivor's story, combined with the mounting number of missing person reports from Indianapolis, led investigators to suspect the unthinkable: that Baumeister might be responsible for the disappearances of multiple men. With a search warrant in hand, police arrived at Fox Hollow Farm, determined to uncover the truth. As they stepped onto the property, a palpable sense of unease hung in the air. The estate, with its pristine lawns and grand facade, seemed an unlikely setting for such atrocities. But as the search began, the idyllic image of Fox Hollow Farm began to crumble. The first discovery was a single bone fragment, unearthed near the edge of the wooded area. At first, it was unclear whether it belonged to an animal or a human. But as forensic experts examined the fragment, they confirmed it was human. What followed was a cascade of grim discoveries. More fragments were found scattered throughout the woods, small pieces of skulls, femurs, and ribs. Each new find deepened the growing horror of what had occurred on this seemingly tranquil property. Forensic teams worked methodically, mapping out the locations of each fragment and marking the ground with small orange flags. The sheer number of remains uncovered was staggering, with early estimates suggesting the presence of at least 11 victims. As the search continued, it became clear that the full scale of Baumeister's crimes might never be known. Some fragments were so weathered and scattered that identifying them would be nearly impossible. The discoveries sent shockwaves through the community. Neighbors who had once admired Fox Hollow Farm were horrified, to learn what had been concealed just beyond their property lines. Families of missing men began to hope for answers, but braced for the devastating possibility that their loved ones' remains might be among those unearthed. How could such horrors remain hidden for so long? And would the evidence uncovered at Fox Hollow Farm be enough to bring justice for the countless lives lost? As investigators pressed deeper into the wooded areas of Fox Hollow Farm, the true horror of Herb Baumeister's crimes came into focus. The sheer volume of remains uncovered was staggering. By the time forensic teams concluded their initial excavation, over 10,000 bone fragments had been recovered, each one telling a story of unimaginable violence and suffering. The fragments were scattered across the property, some partially buried, others left exposed to the elements. The size and condition of the fragments suggested a sinister pattern. Many of the bones showed signs of being burned, leading investigators to believe that Baumeister had attempted to destroy evidence by incinerating his victims. The chilling reality was that he had treated human lives as disposable, leaving their remains to rot in shallow graves or reduced to ash. Each discovery was a grim reminder of the lives that had been taken. Forensic specialists faced the monumental task of identifying the victims, piecing together the fragments like a macabre puzzle. DNA testing, dental records, and meticulous cataloging became their tools in the pursuit of justice. Every new match brought closure to a grieving family, but it also added to the growing weight of Baumeister's atrocities. The discoveries painted a clear picture of Baumeister's methodical cruelty. He had lured his victims to Fox Hollow Farm under the guise of companionship, only to betray their trust in the most violent way imaginable. The secluded property had allowed him to operate undetected for years, turning it into a house of horrors, hidden behind a mask of suburban respectability. As news of the discovery spread, the community was gripped by fear and disbelief. How had Baumeister been able to commit such heinous acts without anyone noticing? And how many more victims might still remain unidentified, their stories forever lost to time? As police gathered more evidence tying Herb Baumeister to the gruesome discoveries at Fox Hollow Farm, they knew they were closing in on a man capable of unimaginable cruelty. But Baumeister, ever the manipulator, had no intention of facing justice. When police sought to bring him in for questioning, he was nowhere to be found. He had fled Indiana, leaving his family and his nightmarish crimes behind. Baumeister's escape sparked a manhunt that spanned multiple states. Investigators followed a trail of credit card transactions, gas station receipts, and sightings from the public, piecing together his movements as he traveled west. Despite their best efforts, Baumeister remained elusive. His cunning allowed him to stay one step ahead of the authorities, slipping through the cracks just as they thought they were closing in. He barely looked me in the eye, just paid for gas and left. I remember thinking he seemed off, but I didn't know who he was until I saw his face on the news later. Baumeister eventually crossed into Ontario, Canada, where his desperate journey came to an abrupt end. At a quiet park near Lake Huron, he parked his car, scribbled a brief suicide note, and took his own life with a single gunshot. The note made no mention of the victims buried on his property or the families left searching for answers. Instead, it focused on financial troubles, a final deflection from the horrors he had inflicted. We were closing in on him. We wanted him alive so he could answer for what he'd done. But instead, he chose to take the coward's way out. For investigators, Baumeister's death was a double-edged sword. It marked the end of a manhunt, but left countless questions unanswered. Without a trial, there would be no opportunity for victims' families to confront him, no chance to hear him admit his guilt, and no possibility of uncovering the full extent of his crimes. I wanted him to face us, to tell us why he did this. Now I'll never know. Baumeister's death closed one chapter of the investigation, but left the case far from resolved. His secrets died with him, leaving a haunting void for investigators and families alike. With Herb Baumeister gone, the responsibility of uncovering the full scope of his crimes fell squarely on the shoulders of investigators and forensic teams. The discovery of over 10,000 bone fragments on Fox Hollow Farm presented an unprecedented challenge. Many of the remains were small, weathered by years of exposure to the elements, and some had been burned in Baumeister's attempts to destroy evidence. Identifying the victims was like assembling a puzzle with far too many missing pieces. Forensic scientists worked tirelessly, employing advanced techniques such as DNA analysis, dental record comparisons, and isotopic testing to link the remains to missing persons. Each fragment told a story, offering clues about the age, gender, and even the possible lifestyles of the victims. The process was painstakingly slow but essential. Every match brought closure to a grieving family, providing an answer to years of uncertainty and heartache. The investigators focused on cases of young men who had gone missing in the Indianapolis area during the years Baumeister was active. Most of the victims had been part of the LGBTQ+ community, frequenting the same bars and clubs that Baumeister had targeted. Many of these cases had been dismissed or overlooked at the time, written off as runaways or young men who had chosen to leave their lives behind. But now, their fates were being pieced together from fragments of bone and shards of hope. As each new match was made, families were notified. For some, the confirmation of their loved one's fate brought bittersweet relief, an answer to years of unanswered prayers. For others, it opened fresh wounds, forcing them to confront the horrifying reality of what their sons had endured. Despite the progress, many remains remained unidentified. The sheer number of fragments, combined with the passage of time, meant that some victims might never be named. Yet, the forensic teams persevered, knowing that every match brought a small measure of justice to those who had been silenced by Baumeister's cruelty. Would the final pieces of this grim puzzle ever fall into place, or would the full scope of Baumeister's crimes remain a mystery buried in the soil of Fox Hollow Farm? The identification of victims brought some families closure, but for many, the anguish of their loved ones' violent deaths ignited a determination to seek justice. Herb Baumeister's suicide had robbed them of the opportunity to confront him in court, to demand answers for the unimaginable pain he had caused. With no trial, no confession, and no explanation, families were left to wrestle with questions that might never be answered. For those whose loved ones were still missing, the fight became even more personal. They pushed law enforcement to continue searching Fox Hollow Farm, to dig deeper, both literally and figuratively, for any remaining evidence that could link Baumeister to other victims. Many of the families became vocal advocates for reform, challenging the systemic failures that allowed Baumeister to operate undetected for so long. These men deserved more than to be forgotten or ignored. If the system had acted sooner, if people had listened, maybe my son would still be here today. The case highlighted glaring issues in how society and law enforcement treated the LGBTQ+ community at the time. Many of Baumeister's victims had been dismissed as runaways or marginalized due to their sexual orientation. Families accused the police of not taking their concerns seriously enough, and community leaders demanded changes to ensure that no one else would have to endure the same neglect. In the years following the discoveries at Fox Hollow Farm, several families worked to create support networks for those affected by violent crime. Memorials were erected in honor of the victims, transforming the farm from a symbol of horror into a place of remembrance. These efforts not only honored the lives lost, but also served as a stark reminder of the dangers of prejudice and indifference. Though justice for Herb Baumeister's victims could never be fully realized, the family's tireless advocacy ensured that their loved ones' stories would not be erased. They brought attention to systemic failures and made it clear that every life, regardless of background or circumstance, deserves dignity, respect, and justice. Would their fight inspire meaningful change, or would the lessons of Fox Hollow Farm fade with time, leaving society vulnerable to the next monster hiding in plain sight? Years after the horrifying discoveries at Fox Hollow Farm, the property has become a haunting symbol of tragedy and mystery. Despite its dark history, the farm still stands, bearing the scars of its grim past. Its current owners, fully aware of the property's infamy, have embraced its notoriety while attempting to preserve its legacy as a place of reflection and remembrance. The haunting atmosphere of Fox Hollow Farm has attracted a strange mix of visitors over the years. Paranormal enthusiasts, drawn by tales of restless spirits, have flocked to the property, claiming to experience unexplained phenomena. Reports of ghostly apparitions, disembodied voices, and shadowy figures have turned the farm into a hotspot for ghost hunters and supernatural investigators. But for others, the farm serves as a somber reminder of the lives lost there. Families of victims, as well as advocates for LGBTQ+ rights, visit the site to pay their respects and keep the memory of the victims alive. Over time, small memorials have been placed around the property, turning it into a space of mourning and reflection. The farmhouse itself remains the most unnerving part of the property. Some who have lived there or visited describe an unshakable sense of unease, as though the walls hold the memories of the horrors that took place. The basement, where Baumeister is believed to have committed many of his crimes, is especially infamous. Visitors recount feeling an oppressive weight in the air, as if the echoes of the past refused to fade. Despite its grim reputation, Fox Hollow Farm has also become a catalyst for change. Its story has sparked important conversations about societal attitudes toward marginalized communities, the flaws in law enforcement practices, and the need for vigilance in uncovering hidden dangers. The property, once a place of unimaginable horror, now stands as both a warning and a memorial. A place where the past demands to be remembered so that its lessons are never forgotten. How does a place so steeped in darkness continue to exist in the modern world? Is it a haunting reminder of the evil that once thrived there, or a testament to the resilience of those who refuse to let its history be forgotten? Herb Baumeister's story is one of unthinkable cruelty, hidden behind a facade of suburban success. His crimes, buried for years beneath the soil of Fox Hollow Farm, serve as a haunting reminder of the dangers that can lurk in plain sight. The thousands of human remains uncovered on his property revealed the extent of his atrocities, but they also highlighted the failures of a society that overlooked the missing men who fell victim to his twisted desires. For the families of the victims, the fight for justice has never truly ended. While Baumeister's death prevented him from standing trial, the discoveries at Fox Hollow Farm brought long overdue attention to the lives he destroyed. Each bone fragment uncovered was a step toward giving those men their identities back, ensuring they were no longer just statistics or forgotten faces on missing person posters. But the story of Fox Hollow Farm extends beyond its tragic past. It's a story about resilience, about the determination of families and communities to seek answers and demand accountability. It's a reminder of the importance of valuing every life, regardless of social status, background, or identity. The case also forced law enforcement and society at large to confront their biases, sparking conversations about the systemic issues that allowed Baumeister to operate undetected for so long. Today, Fox Hollow Farm stands as both a memorial and a warning. It's a place where the past refuses to be silenced, where the voices of the victims demand to be heard. The horrors that unfolded there will never be forgotten, serving as a stark reminder that evil can hide behind even the most ordinary of facades. Thank you for joining us on this journey into one of the darkest chapters in true crime history. If this story has compelled you, make sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to stay updated on more cases that uncover the hidden truths behind humanity's darkest moments. What do you think Fox Hollow Farm represents today? A place of haunting sorrow, a lesson in vigilance, or both? Share your thoughts in the comments below.